This is a recording of Chapter 10, Ecce Romani. Just as a bit of advice, I would recommend reading the culture sections both before and after the chapter. One on the major gods and goddesses worshipped by the Romans on pages 68 through 69, and then the other one on the treatment of slaves, pages 75 through 77. But at any rate, Chapter 10, Departure. Interia in Villa Corneliana. Now remember that Corneliana is an adjective that you can take a noun and by adding the suffix anus or ana or inus or ina, you can mean that it relates to whatever that original adjective or that original noun was, in this case Cornelius. So meanwhile, in the country house related to the Cornelius, or you can just simply say in the Cornelian country house, omnes. Omnes here is an adjective and it's going to refer to masculine or feminine item, people. And here it is substantivized because it literally is going to be all the people strenue laborat. They are working strenuously. The long E on strenue indicates that it is an adverb. Aurelia, tunicam et stolam et palam geret. Aurelia wears, geret is your verb here, is wearing, does wear, the tunica and stola and pala. You have a tricorn crescens as well as a polysyndeton to indicate that they are individualized, most likely that they are put on individually, one at a time. And remember that the tunica is the basic undergarment, the stola is the dress, and the pala is the glorified shawl. Anquilam jubet alias tunicas et stolas et palas in quistam ponere. Your subject here is the she of the jubet. Don't say anquilam first, it's in the accusative and therefore a direct object. So she orders a slave woman, and then all the way down to the end, ponere, to put or place other tunicas, alias tunicas, and stolas and palas into the trunk. In quistam is into because in followed by the accusative. Marcus et Sextus tunicas et togas praetextas gerunt, quod in itinere et in urbe togas praetextas liberi gerere solent. So back to the beginning, Marcus and Sextus, they gerunt, they wear tunicas and toga praetextas. The toga praetextas, the purple-bordered toga worn by children, as well as the consuls and praetors, those that hold imperium. So you'd be able to recognize them not only by the fact that they would be wearing the toga praetextas, but also they would have the fasces carried in front of them by the lictors. Nevertheless, so they wear the tunicas and toga praetextas, quod, in line 3, because on a journey in itinere et in urbe and in the city, liberi, on line 4, the children, solent, are accustomed, gerere, to wear the toga praetextas. And remember the liberi, that is also the word for free, because children are the free ones. Servus alias tunicas et togas praetextas in quistam ponit. So a slave, ponit at the very end, places or puts alias tunicas, other tunicas, and toga praetextas into the trunk or suitcase. You could translate as quistam. In cubiculo Gai, servus togas viriles in quistam ponit, quod Gaius in urbe togam virum gerere solet. So in cubiculo Gai, in the bedroom of Gaius. Gai here, it is a form that could be a bunch of people named Gaius as a nominative plural, but it's not a bunch of people named Gaius doing stuff. So here it's going to be genitive singular, showing possession, the bedroom of Gaius. A slave, servus, puts ponit, manly togas, into the trunk. Remember the togas viriles, those manly togas, are those plain white togas worn when one has come of age. Quod, in line 5, because Gaius Solet is accustomed to wear the manly toga in the city, in urbe. Gaius ipse togam virilem induit. Gaius himself, induit, puts on the manly toga. Davus qui ipse omnia curat ad Januam stat. So Davus, and then if you wanted to, you could go to the ad Januam stat. That is our main clause. Davus stands at the door. Remember that stat comes from sto stare, not the word that means immediately. And then in the middle you have qui ipse omnia curat, which is, of course, a subordinate clause. So Davus, who takes care of omnia, all things. Omnia could be nominative, plural, neuter, or accusative, plural, neuter. Here it's accusative because it's the direct object. It's answering whom or what he takes care of. And it's qui, who himself, ipse, takes care of all things, stands at the door. Servos jubet quistas e cubiculis in viam portare. So servos again is accusative, so don't start with it. Go and find your subject, which is in the verb jubet. he orders the slaves to portare, to carry the trunks, kistas, egobiculis, out of the bedrooms in Wiam into the road. Baculum habet et clamat. He holds a stick. He has a stick. Habet, he holds or he has. And shouts, drive on, you wicked slaves. Agite, remember, is the form of an imperative verb, and it's the form when you're talking to more than one. And thus that means that servi scelesti, which look nominative, is actually going to be vocative because you're talking directly to them. And then dormitis ne, ne on the end of it indicates that it's a question. Are y'all sleeping? Do y'all sleep? Hodie non cras discadimus. Discadimus. We leave, we part, we go away. Hodie, today. Non cras, not tomorrow. Please do not confuse discadimus with another verb, which would be descendimus, entirely different, but they look marginally similar. Discadimus here is, of course, go away. Marcus quoque servos incitat, et iubet eos kistas in raedam ponere. Marcus also incitat, spurs on, urges on the servos, the slaves, et iubet, and he orders eos, them, eos here referring to the slaves, ponere, to put the kistas, the suitcases, the trunks, into the carriage. Servus quidam, a certain slave, nomine Geta, by the name Geta. Geta is a slave here that is a masculine slave, but there are a few words in the first declension that indeed are feminine, and it's one of them, his proper name. So by name Geta, he aripits, he grabs the kistam sexti, the trunk of Sextus, again with sexti with the long I. It is not going to be a bunch of people named Sextus doing things, so it's not nominative plural, but here it's going to be genitive singular, showing possession. So he grabs the trunk of Sextus, or Sextus's apostrophe s trunk, and he yakets from yakio, yakere, a third io verb. He throws it in raedam, into the carriage. Kawe Geta, be careful Geta. Kawe here is the imperative singular. Remember, to make the imperative singular, you just take the infinitive and drop the re, so this would come from the verb kaweo, kawere. So be careful, Geta. Geta again, direct address, evocative. Sextus shouts, worried. Now, in English, we want to say Sextus shouts worriedly, but in Latin, they would infinitely prefer to have an adjective, like solicitus, modify the subject sextus instead of making it into an adverb, at which point solicitus would be solicite, just like you see in the very middle of the line, in line 1, strain away. But here it's an adjective. Cura meam, or cura quista meam, take care of my trunk. Here, cura, again, is the imperative singular. When you take the infinitive and drop the re, take care of my trunk. Noli eam jacere, don't throw it. Now, the eam here is going to be translated it. Even though it's feminine, the reason why we translated it is because it is referring to something, not a person, whereas previously we could see eam, and as well we see it later as being her, but here it's referring to the trunk. And again, noli and nolite are the two words that indicate a negative command, and both of them require an infinitive as the form that goes with them, so that's why it is in that line 12, noli jacere. Tandem, omnes quistai in raeda sunt. So at last, tandem, omnes quistai, all the trunks. Now, omnes is not all people here, but it is referring to something feminine in the form of trunks, quistai, and so therefore that's why it is going to be quistai modified by omnes. So at last, all the trunks are sunt in the carriage. So not into the carriage here, because in plus an ablative is going to be in. Ascended Marcus et Sextus, ascended Euclides, ascended Aurelia. So Marcus and Sextus climb, implied, into the carriage. Ascended Euclides, Euclides climbs into the carriage. Aurelia climbs, ascended Aurelia, implied again into the carriage. Here we have another tricolon crescanes, as well as a anaphora, the repetition of that verb ascended. Now we meet a new person here in the form of Euclides. Euclides is a Greek. He is going to be rather educated and function as the tutor of the children. Everybody that's a slave in the ancient Roman world is most likely going to be with a certain skill set that would determine what their jobs will be. Euclides could even possibly be more educated than his own masters, but nevertheless, he is from Greece most likely, and a slave, as probably a victim of war or in some sort of other situation acquired from Greece. His namesake is actually the father of geometry, which we call two-dimensional geometry or planar geometry, Euclidean. Any geometry that involves more than 2 dimensions, we call it non-Euclidean geometry. And Euclid, again, our fellow Euclides' namesake, wrote a work called The Elements, in which he laid down all the rules of geometry with his laws, which are called, of course, termed postulates. Back to the story on line 14. Gaius ipse ascendere est paratus. Gaius himself, Gaius ipse, est paratus is ready. Now, paratus, however, is also a participle. We have seen participles before, but this is a new type for us. This is what's called a perfect passive participle. And instead of translating it as verbing, like we saw with the word laborantes in chapter 7, as working, the working slaves, here it is going to be translated as having been verbed or simply verbed. And this is the verb, of course, parare, to prepare. So it literally would translate as Gaius himself is prepared, or we colloquially can say ready, ascendere, to climb in. Cyrus Rhaedarius, quoque ascendit, et equos incitare parat. So Cyrus, comma, the coachman, comma, also climbs in, quoque ascendit, et preparat, prepares incitare, to incite the horses. Here on line 14, please note Rhaedarius is an appositive. That is a word that merely replaces another word sharing the same case, and thus indeed renames that word. It doesn't have to be a subject as it is here, but just any word that is renamed and gives us more information is indeed an appositive. It is said to be in apposition. Subito exclamat Aurelia, ubi est Cornelia? Suddenly Aurelia shouts out, where is Cornelia? Eo ipso tempore. Now that's in the ablative case, and so you're going to translate it, remember, by, with, because of, from, in, on, at. And at is the best one. At that tempore, time, ipso, itself, Cornelia currit in viam. Cornelia runs into the road. Eam, Gaius jubet in raidam statum ascendere. Gaius is our subject. Gaius orders eam. Now, previously in line 12, the second to last word eam, we translated as it, but that's because it was referring to a non-person feminine thing. Eam here is referring to Cornelia, so it's her. So Gaius orders her immediately statum ascendere, to climb in the raidam, into the carriage. Statum, immediately, Rhaedarius equos incitat, the coachman incites the horses. Discadunt Cornelii, the many people named Cornelius, everybody in the family. The Cornelians discadunt, leave, depart, go away. Nevertheless, I hope you do study for the quizzes, most especially the, make sure you know the words, as well as the content. And again, read those passages or those sections of culture, both before and after chapter 10. Good luck.